Welcome today, parents. My name is Bob Brennan. You're watching Parents Living in Hope. And here at Parents Living in Hope, we help parents navigate the process of gender identity sorting out that goes on with their children and help them navigate this process, leading to a place of healing for the family and for the child. So welcome to the program today. Today I'm addressing the idea of responsibility. Parental responsibility. What is your responsibility in the process of healing for your child? Now, if you haven't watched the previous video, which was focused on perspective, the healing perspective, then I suggest that you go back and watch that first before you continue with this video. It will make a lot more sense to you and understanding for you in moving forward with healing and action. So today we're looking at the idea of responsibility. Why is this important for a parent to take responsibility? Well, we know in part that a large percentage of children, adolescents, your child dealing with gender issues has to do with wounding and pain in their life. So what we're beginning to do is look at potentially addressing areas of wounding and pain. Now, only your child really knows what those areas of wounding and pain is, and sometimes they don't actually know, but they know some of them. But what you're doing is a process of preparing yourself to have discussion with your child about potential effects that you have had on them that have caused wounding and or pain in some way. And, I know that no parent has ever intentionally inflicted wounding or pain or suffering on their child. So I want to distinguish this motivation or intent from actuality or impact or effect. Okay? So a difference between your intent as a parent, which is not to hurt your child, and the reality of our effect or impact on our children that may have caused it. Here's the analogy. If you're driving down the street in your car and you're stopped at a stop sign and somebody rear ends you and they get out of the car and they say, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, I'm really sorry that I rear-ended your car. I was just looking at my text for just 1 second and I found myself right on top of your bumper. So since I didn't intend to damage your car, will you be willing to let me off of any responsibility to repair your car or to reconcile the situation? What would you say to them? You probably would not agree that even though they did not intend to damage your car, that they are not responsible for it, right? So we're responsible for our actions more so in terms of the impact or the effect that they have. So this is what we want to begin to do with our children in terms of what impact, negative impact, may you have had in their life. And this is going all the way back to the beginning, really, that may have caused wounding in them. Now, you can take a guess, and maybe you even know what some of those things are. But again, your child is really the only one that actually knows, because these children who are dealing with gender issues are always the more sensitive members of the family. And so what might not hurt one of your other children in terms of your effect or impact could very possibly hurt this child that's dealing with gender issues. And so we don't know what those are. But the starting place to dealing with those things is for you as the parent to look at yourself, to begin to assess yourself in terms of where might I had a negative impact on my child. Now let's talk about negative impacts. There are two types of negative impacts. Sometimes we call them traumas even. And there is an overt impact, in other words, abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, these kinds of things, even verbal abuse. These are more overt. These are actions taken against a child. Again, not necessarily intending to do harm, however, producing a harm in them. So when we look at the harm to someone, we're looking at it in terms of their experience. It may not have been harmful for you. It may not have been harmful for anyone else. However, it was harmful or hurtful for your particular child. So we want to respect this, that in a sense, wounding and pain is in the eyes of the beholder, right? And so we want to begin to look at this from the standpoint of your responsibility. What are you responsible for? The second kind of wounding is a wounding of neglect. Now, we haven't thought about this type of wounding in the past. It's more recent, but we're finding that neglect, a child whose father works all the time and is never spending time with that child, this is neglect, because children need both parents in their life, involved in their life in a positive way. And so these are neglect. Obviously, if there's a divorce, there's an abandonment. These are things that are cannot be helped in most cases. And for you as a parent, maybe you never really had control of that yourself. It was not your choice. And so these are things that happen that are hurtful to a child. And so even though we didn't intend to do that, or you didn't have control over it, we still need to focus on reconciling that with your child. Okay. Sometimes the reconciliation is an apology, and sometimes it's more than that. So we want to begin to look at what impacts you may had, both overt as well as the area of neglect on your child. The area of neglect often is that which was not fulfilled, which a child needed but was not fulfilled. They were not able to experience it. A parent that never took their child out to the park, or never took them out in a family setting, or never went on a vacation, these kinds of things. These are the areas of neglect that fit into this category of unfulfilled needs that a child has. So we're beginning to take responsibility. We're beginning to assess ourselves in terms of where things might have been hurtful for a child. And we want to write these things down. We want to recall these and own them for yourself in terms of what may have occurred. And then we want to take the next step, which is we want to approach your son or daughter to have some discussion about this kind of thing. The way we do this is that we posture this in the form of you telling your child that you want to improve your relationship with them, which you do. And so you frame it in this way of improving the relationship. And you ask your son or daughter if they will consent to that, if they're open to that. In most cases, they will be. Sometimes they're not. If they're not, then we just need to keep that door open. We need to say, I do want to improve my relationship with you. It's not what it could be. And I hope that at some point in time, you'll be willing to talk about these things so that we can get them resolved and we can even be closer together in this next chapter of our life. So we want to approach the son or daughter in this way. If the son or daughter is willing to talk about these things, then we need to be open to listening to their potential hurts, pains. They may come in the form of resentments towards you as a parent. They may come in the form of hurt that you were never even aware of. When abuse happens, especially sexual violation of a child by a neighbor, by a relative, the child will often, or the victim in this case, a victim child will often hold that against the parent for not being there to protect them. Now, maybe you couldn't be there, it's just not possible. Parents cannot often have an eye on their child 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so these things happen. But this is a place where a child will hold this against parents. So these are the kinds of things we want to surface. And we want the child to be able to freely talk about them, listening well for you as the parent, listening well to them, which means reflecting back what you're understanding without judging anything, without having an opinion about them, without justifying why you did what you did. The justification of why you did what you did is meaningful to you. It's not meaningful to the process of reconciliation with your child. Okay? So the reason it happened, the circumstances you were in are secondary to the process of reconciliation. So we want to get to talk about these things. We want to get to hear from your child and empathize with them about what they must have gone through, how painful that must have been. Often the issue is that your child didn't have anybody to talk to, didn't have anybody to care for them when they were going through this difficult experience, whether it was one event or a series or a theme of events in their life. They didn't have anybody to support them or even allow them to express themselves in terms of what they were experiencing, their pain. So we want to allow the child to talk about these things freely and openly without responding to them. So a first meeting related to these things would be really just listening and understanding, empathizing. And then in later meetings, you may come back and respond and ask about how these things can be reconciled, what your child needs from you in order to be free from this. Sometimes what children need is just for you to acknowledge the fact that they were hurt, that they were suffering in some way as a result of the occurrence of what happened. So this is really a starting place. These discussions can go on for some time, and this is part of a reconciliation. You as the parent are initiating this process of healing, really, is what it is, because these wounds are those underlying roots or those underlying wounds that impact our gender development. They actually impact them because they affect the way that your son or daughter looks at the masculine or the feminine, whatever their biological sex is. It affects how they look at these things based on the parent or the combination of persons that were involved with their wounding or their pain. So this is a good starting place. We'll be continuing to talk about this in further videos, but that's it for today. So I hope that you benefited from this. Again, if you did not watch the previous video to this, please do so, so that you can get the framework for understanding why taking responsibility is so important. That's it for today. If this video is helpful for you, feel free to enter in your name into the right side of this website to receive further notification of media. And please know that there's always hope for you and your family.